Watch it.
Well, hopefully that's not a reflection of my internet. All right, let's get there. Get the recording going. Hello there, and welcome to the Hawk Fanatic Instant Reaction Podcast. We don't have like an official like logo or anything for this. This is kind of a spur of the moment thing. I am Rob Howe. I am joined by Dallas Jones. It is Thursday, March the 13th, about 7:45 p.m. Fresh off an unfortunate and emotional, I would say, loss by the Iowa men's basketball team, 106-94, in what is, Dallas, the highest scoring game in the history of the Big Ten men's basketball tournament.
What a better there's no better way for Fran to probably go out than in the highest scoring game that the Big Ten tournament has ever seen. I mean, if you told any team in the country, you scored 94 points, your best player has 30, and you lose by double digits, they wouldn't believe it. Like that just doesn't happen to anybody. But for Iowa, it's not even a surprise.
No, I mean, if you've watched this team, particularly this year away from Carver, the defense has just been absent. And I know it's not always connected in
Yeah.
people's minds, but offensive rebounding is part of defense, and they were awful tonight. It's a bad matchup for Iowa. Illinois is long, they're athletic, and kind of the worst case scenario. Iowa hung on the backboards last night. I think they lost by 2 to Ohio State. Tonight, it was just a massacre.
Yeah, and it's funny because it's like, oh, it's a bad matchup. But if you look at the direction that basketball has gone in the last 15 years, the bad matchups are athletic wings and bigs, which is what every team wants, and
Mm-hmm.
guards that put pressure on the rim and put pressure, in the backcourt. And that's what they run into every time in the postseason. I mean, the last 2 years losing to Ohio State, it was kind of the same deal where they can't get stops when they needed to. And tonight, even when they did get stops, half the time they would get the rebound back. So then now you're playing twice as much defense when you are getting stops. So those numbers aren't going to even out for you very well. And I mean, offensively, you do everything you can. You make 11 threes, you shoot, 55% from the field. But, if you go up 106 points in 40 minutes, like that's just never going to work.
Well, I will say, give Illinois credit. I think Iowa had a good defensive game plan, what it could do against this team. They let Boswell shoot. Dude shooting 22, 23% from three coming into this game. He's friggin' 10 of 14 from the floor and 4 for 7 from three. You got the guy to shoot that you wanted to shoot, and he made him.
Yeah, I mean, it's just tough. And like this time of the year, it's usually that's how it works. I mean, Brad Underwood knows that sometimes it takes guys stepping up that don't normally do it. And usually, when you look at a conference tournament where these teams know each other so well, it's going to be somebody out of the norm that makes that difference. And tonight it was Boswell, and it was every time that Iowa would start to, come back, Peyton would hit a big three or something like that, they'd answer. And if you can't string together stops, no matter what it looks like, no matter what your defensive game plan is, if they're going to kill you on all three levels. There's just nothing to do about that.
Yeah, and if is it a Visich? I
He
don't know how.
started the game at the very first play of the game. It was like they run pick and pop, leave him wide open at the top of the key, and he knocks it down. So then you have their center that you're trying to guard a certain way, knocking down open shots. Then the guard that shoots 20%, he's knocking down open shots. So it's like even when you're a poor defending team and doing the right things, it's just not falling your way. So it was like Iowa knew that they were going to have to just black out and shoot the lights out, and they almost did. And Illinois answered every single part.
Yeah, they gave Boswell his shots. They were going to hedge. Lodge was hedging out on a Visich and laid back. But even though they were they had the right game plan, it still felt like they were a step slow on rotations. And a lot of times, Dallas, they were not connected defensively. It looked like guys were looking at each other like, hey, who's supposed to be there? And at this point in the season, it's not good to see.
No, and I saw a clip, I think it was a couple weeks ago, of St. John's and their defensive rotations, and they weren't even talking. It wasn't even like they're throwing guys side to side. As soon as the ball moved, everybody knew exactly where to go. And this is high level basketball. Iowa's won way too many games, not just this year. I mean, 17 games, they don't hand out 17 games, but in the last few years, you can't win that many games and still have these type of mistakes, especially at this point in the season. Everybody should know where they're supposed to be, the next three steps. I know that they sit in practice and like every other team and have five guys around the perimeter and swing the ball around and run a pick and roll and show the rotations. They've probably done that more times than you could even count this year. But when the lights get bright and then you're in the Big Ten tournament and it's a 4 or 5 point game and you have a chance to beat a team that might be more talented than you, might be more athletic than you have to execute even more. You can't take a step back. You can't think twice before you move. You can't, have those missteps because a team that is as good as and talented as Illinois, like we're not talking about a team that is the bottom half of the Big Ten or doesn't have the potential to make a run. I mean, if you look on national TV the last couple of weeks, and especially after tonight, there's a lot of people that think this Illinois team is a lot better than their record shows. And if they made it to the Elite Eight, there wouldn't be too many people that were, surprised that they were there.
No, they can win this tournament. There's no doubt in my mind they can win this tournament. And, it's, if you just dropped in today and were like, well, how did this Illinois team, why doesn't it have a better record? Injuries, a lot of turnover. I think they had like one guy that was back from last year's team that won the Big Ten tournament that was actually playing this year. Another guy was redshirting, but that's Illinois. Illinois has a lot of resources, a lot more resources than Iowa has. I mean, you just look at the roster and the guy, I mean, Riley is a legit freshman. They've got good freshmen, they've got good transfers. They're a good team, and Iowa needed to play a really good game. 10.5-point dogs coming into this game, I think was the last line I saw. That's telling you got to play good basketball. You can't get out rebounded 41-24, and it was worse than that for a lot of the game, and expect to win. And it really came down to that, and you just wonder from a fatigue standpoint, it looked, especially when the last Illinois run, when they got up, it just like Iowa was done.
Yeah, and it was, Fran gets ejected, and there's been. I thought it was funny that it was his first like check of the year. I would say like all year I was like he's really doesn't really go after it. Like the Iowa State game, Purdue game, games that are super close, he wasn't really getting super animated
Yeah.
and such. So I thought it was interesting that was his ejection. But Peyton knocked down a couple of threes, and it looked like they had some juice, but it really wasn't anybody else that made that step at that point of the game. I mean, Josh missed a couple like shots that he normally makes, but outside of that, there was nobody really bringing that pressure to put on Illinois. And shout out to Peyton. Like he knew that this could be his last time wearing a black and gold jersey or, last time when it matters. And he went out and did it. But you look at all the long rebounds they gave up. And it wasn't even just this game. I mean, we saw that in the Iowa State and the Purdue game, games where they have a chance to beat a team that's in that upper echelon of the country. And it's the little things. It's not, oh, can you make a contested shot? They could do that no problem. Like look at the free throw line. I think in the first half they had made 50% of their threes and 20% of their free throws. Like they'll do the hard things, but then the easy things is what loses them games like this.
Yeah, that was a rough point when Drew missed the three throws, but to Iowa's credit, it just kept coming, man. It looked like Illinois it was like the Rocky One, man, where Stallone just keeps getting up and Carl Weathers, is in the other corner going, I can't believe this son of a bitch is getting back up again. And Iowa was doing that. And that's really been, I mean, when you look at the stretch of this season after you lose Freeman and Koch is unable to play, two guys that would have been, well, Freeman, obviously, one of your best players and your key post, but Koch would have been contributed this year. there was some narratives out there that this team quit on Fran and all that. I think right up to the end of this game, Dallas, this locker room was together. You watch those guys walk off the floor to brace each other, the tears, they care about each other. This was never an effort thing or a bought in thing. This was not having enough, really.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, if you look around the country, you could see there's teams that gave up on the season. Like,
Yep.
this is not, it's not like teams are going to pretend or fake it till they make it. Like, it's hard, especially with how much time and effort you put in to a basketball season. If you don't have it, it'll show. And this team, time and time again, even when they didn't probably have a chance to make the NCAA tournament without winning this whole thing, where they didn't even know if they were going to be playing in the Big Ten tournament on Sunday. Like, winning those types of games, it just shows that no matter what they're playing for, they are playing for each other. So, I mean, if there's one thing that you can say about the Fran McCaffrey culture, they care about each other. They're showing up for each other.
No doubt. And we'll talk more about that on the other side of this break. Want to do an ad read here, let you guys know that support for the podcast comes from Systems Unlimited, celebrating 50 years of providing services to people living with disabilities and mental health needs throughout East Central Iowa. A list of their services and upcoming events can be found at sui.org. That is sui.org. Hear from a few more sponsors now. Dallas and I will be back on the other side to talk about what's ahead for Iowa men's basketball. Hang tight. And we're back on the Hawk Fanatic Instant Reaction podcast here after the Iowa men's basketball loss 106-94 to Illinois this evening in the Big Ten tournament. We'll see what's next for the Hawkeyes. A couple more reads here for you guys. Switching is easy. We do it all the time. We switch on the lights. We switch TV channels. Some of us switch partners while square dancing. I know that's Dallas. That's a stretch. But what is not a stretch is how you can switch and save with State Farm. In fact, State Farm agent Chad Birch right here in Iowa can switch you over so you can start saving today. Chad and his team are ready to welcome you to the State Farm neighborhood. With Chad Birch, it's easy to switch and save. Just give him a call when you want the real deal. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Black Angel Restaurant, downtown Iowa City. Perez Brothers owned and operated, formerly of El Banditos, Perez Brothers Tacos. Black Angel Restaurant, downtown Iowa City. Live music on the weekends. Good stuff. Go check them out. Black Angel Restaurant. Dallas, it feels like change is coming, man. And it's felt like that for the back half of this season. It's just a matter of what it is and when it is. We saw today that Northwestern and Chris Collins announced that they were not going to take a postseason bid. Minnesota has moved on. They're now looking for their head coach. It's a very delicate situation here for Iowa, and different in the sense of Minnesota is you've got the all-time winningest coach in the history of the program. You're trying to make this as digestible as possible, and that ain't easy to do these days.
No, and it's really hard because I don't know if I'm not super familiar with the way other programs have handled this, but you have your winningest coach, but I don't think there's a fan base that's been more ready for their most winningest coach to move on. And that could be to the fault of just the way Fran kind of operates. He is very much like he worries about basketball. He worries about the guys in his locker room, the guys on his staff. And, that's where he pours into. And that's great for the players and for the staff. That's why they fight for him. They show up for him. But being a college basketball coach at this level is a lot more than that, especially nowadays. I think the most challenging part about this, if they do decide to move on, is there's a lot of schools who are moving on and a lot of better jobs. And that's where it gets difficult because, yeah, you can look at Fran McCaffrey's tenure and say, this is X, Y, and Z, what didn't happen, but also what could be worse. And there's a lot of ways it could go worse. There's a lot of ways that you could not see success because I was not exactly in a position to, throw a house at new person and say, "Hey, we've got all these shiny things in here. We've got all these great things, and you're going to come in and be able to do X, Y, and Z." It's hard to get guys to Iowa City, especially when you don't have a blank check to hand out like some of these other programs that are going to be looking for coaches. And if I was a coach, I want to go somewhere that I know I have resources, I have money, I have fans showing up to my games. I know that, whether there's ups and downs, I'm going to have that behind me. And that's just not the case here.
Yeah, no doubt. Did you grow up a Hawk fan of Hawk basketball fan, or wasn't it until you got here?
So it's funny enough, I was more of a state fan, but that was
Okay.
mostly because, like, my brother and dad are big Hawkeye fans. So I was like, I'm going to go the other way. So I really wasn't like big following and everything. And then my freshman year was, Peter Jocks last year, I believe,
Okay.
into the Jordan Bohannon era, and then Luca and Keegan and Chris and all of this. So it was funny because to me, I'm like, this is a good program. I see a lot of wins. You see now NBA talent getting
Yep.
there. We saw a national player of the year. You saw a top five pick, saw another first round talent. I actually said this the other day. I was like, it was I think the first time, and you could correct me, I can remember in Iowa basketball history, Keegan and Chris having to leave early threw off their entire, rotation because they're not used to leaving guys leaving early. If you talk about that team when Chris was here solo, they could have easily had Keegan and Joe Wieskamp on that team all of a sudden. They're probably one of the top 8 teams in the country. And then same thing with Chris. They only get 1 year of those guys playing high level basketball. So then that completely changes, the way that your team is moving. And then now with the way NIL affects everything and like recruiting, this team this year could have looked a lot different if Owen Freeman had Jackson Kohler standing next to him, or JP Estrella, or some of those other guys that Iowa was in on and just lost out to bigger names and bigger NILs. Plain
Yep.
simple. Like that's what it comes down to. So when you're not getting those guys, it's really hard to compete. I don't know what else they could have really done with the cards they were dealt.
Yeah, and the situation, I mean, is pretty. I mean, it is what it is, right? The fans have spoken. They're not going to the games. That cannot. You can't. You got to do something. Yeah, that has to be addressed now.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
what is it? So it seems like that the um, court of public opinion wants a new coach, and that's you speak with your wallet. You're not going to the games. You get that, but as Dallas just said, who's going to take the job with the current resources? They're not going to look and they're going to say, you know what, Fran McCaffrey's a pretty good coach. He got this program to this level. How did he do it? Did he do it with did he underachieve or did he overachieve? And what type of odds do I have going into that situation in relation to the rest of the league? We talked about Illinois, not even close in terms of resources. Indiana, Michigan State, you can go down the list. I was probably in the back end of having NIL resources and support and a arena that's just kind of drab. It's great when it's filled. When the women play and it's filled, it's loud, it's great, but people got to lug all the way up to the top to go to the bathroom or get something to drink. It needs to be renovated. There are just so many things that go into this that firing Fran McCaffrey, letting go of Fran McCaffrey is far from the thing that is going to be the only thing. If it is a fix, even if the new person can do more with less, which we'll see, they got to come in here and know that they have a chance to compete with the teams they have to compete with.
Yeah, I mean, perception is everything. Even when, Keegan was playing great, should have been Big Ten Player of the Year. They weren't just packing the house. They were still a
Yeah,
successful team. They won the Big Ten tournament and then followed up the next year with another first round level player and another tournament team. But it's perception. If they have an idea of who Fran McCaffrey is and they have made their decision on this is what we feel about the men's basketball program, also while on the other side the women's team is just exploding, I think that only hurt them. Like that they're like, well, look at this. We love Lisa Luter. We love everybody that's everything that's going on here. And Fran's just kind of like, okay, like I don't, he didn't lose any sleep over it. So I think that it's going to be hard for somebody to come in because are people going to want them to go within? Are they going to want them to go with somebody who's familiar? But then the other half of the fan base going to be like, this is what they always do. It's still the same old Iowa. It's nothing new. But then if you bring in somebody new and they don't see success early, you're going to see everybody saying, this is why you shouldn't have gone so far out. We need this, we need that. It's really not, it's hard. And Beth's going to be in a really tough position because, like you said, nobody's lining up for this job. But at the end of the day, it still is a Power Five position, and all of these fans are going to expect if you're bringing in a new coach that you are competing because they have seen teams compete, just not win tournament games. And it's really hard to win in the tournament. You look at Iowa State. Iowa State has had great teams. How many times have they gone to the Final Four or really made it deep into the playoff into the tournament? Because it's hard. No matter how many NBA players you have, no matter if you have the National Player of the Year or not, but they've got fans showing up in this state. I mean, going back to Carver, I've spent far too many hours in that building from when I was working as a student and then now covering it. I would snap my fingers and trade that for the McLeod Center today. It's just not a basketball arena. And after visiting, Champaign and seeing their arena and see what Mackey Arena looks like and seeing what Hilton looks like, that in itself is something. Because if you talk to like little kids, they want to see that. They want to feel, the excitement, the emotion. For students, they want to feel that. I guarantee you, the students, no matter how packed it is in there, feel a lot different than the students at Ames do.
It's interesting now, and I agree with everything you said. I mean, having been to most of the arenas in the Big Ten, Carver, when it's rocking, it's great, but it's just not rocking enough, at least on the men's side. And, um, when you look at, if you're going to replace Fran McCaffrey, if that's what you've decided as a fan base, you want a new coach. With NIL, it's now up to you as a Hawkeye fan to make sure that the roster is good
Mm-hmm.
enough for whoever the coach is. Now, I'm going to tell you the guy that went and had surgery this year to end his season prematurely probably has pretty good market value. Think Hunter Dickinson type market value. Josh Dix, yeah.
I was gonna say, I think more important or as important as finding the right head coach is making sure that Owen's not wearing a Marquette jersey, that Josh isn't wearing a Creighton jersey. Like those are real things. And guess what? Like I couldn't be mad at them with the amount of money that guys are getting for going to these schools and getting checked. You saw what Coleman Hawkins got. If Coleman Hawkins is getting multi-million-dollar deals and Josh Dix could, really set himself up for success. So I think that that's a whole nother level of obstacles where if you're trying to sell a coach, hey, you're losing one guy who's going to be playing professionally somewhere, and then the two next best players could very well not be here anymore, and that's just up to them. Like we can't really. It's not like it's free agency where you can match the qualifying offer. I was not matching anybody's offers, so it comes down. I know those guys have loved playing here and are committed to being here. I'm not trying to say that they're out the door, but it's a possibility, just like it is for anybody else, and it's not the worst idea for them.
And if you want to just look at it from a comparison standpoint, Iowa needed a quarterback this offseason, and they went and got one for seven figures. So, Iowa fan supporting a program. Now you're going to have to step up and support and fund a basketball program that can compete with everybody else in the conference. Otherwise, it's not like you're just going to out recruit people because and this is not a definitive projection on Owen Freeman's future, but with his game right now, he needs to get a face-up game and needs to be able to shoot the ball farther out on the floor, which I think he can do. He's only halfway through his college career. He can develop more. But if he has a chance to make life-changing money now with an uncertain pro future, how do you blame the kid?
Exactly. I mean, you look at Luka Garza after he finished his junior year, if it was 2024 when he finished his junior year, he would have gotten how much money? You talk about Hunter Dickinson. Luka's twice the player that
Yeah.
I think Hunter is. So like
How about Drew Timmy?
exactly. So
Seriously.
it's like you can't what are you supposed to say? You're getting pro contracts
Yeah.
for college athletics. So it's not like you can look at these guys and say, "Oh, this and that." This is their job. Like this is what people go to college to do the job. These guys are student athletes. These guys who are playing at high level basketball want to play basketball for a long time. They love basketball. If they could do that for also multi-million dollars before they even have to go to the pros or go play, in Germany or Spain if it's not the NBA, you'd much rather do that. You'd much rather be playing, in the Big Ten than playing in Australia or Greece.
Yeah, no doubt. And, it's kind of, for me, the schools kind of get off the hook here because of they messed up this NIL so bad at the front end that it's fallen on fans even more. Fans are paying higher ticket prices. It kind of sucks, but it's what the setup is now. It's what the system is right now. So, do you, because if I don't know how you feel about this, Dallas, but knowing Owen and knowing Josh, they could have left last year. They came back this year. All things being equal, if Iowa were to provide them with a similar package financially as another school, I think they would stay here.
Absolutely. Because also I think a perfect example, our friend from Wisconsin, AJ Store.
Mhm.
He's in Kansas right now. He was a guy last year at Wisconsin. Like the guy looked like one of the premier talents in college basketball. And he can't even get double digits at Kansas this year. No matter what, you're now, I don't see them as guys who just care about the bank accounts. You know, they don't have to worry about that. It's not like they're trying to get their families out of whatever. You want to be a guy if you have that talent level, and they know they can be that here. And guess what? If Josh and Owen are suiting up for the Hawkeyes next season, they're automatically going to be, in my opinion, one of the top half, depending on who they bring in, top halves of the league, just because of the players that they are. And they know, as we've seen with Chris, Keegan, Luca, when you are a guy at Iowa, you're going to get that chance to shine and showcase your abilities that you aren't promised other places. That's one thing that Iowa has going for them. No matter who the coach is, they know that these two guys would be your main horses that are going to lead you next year.
Let's end with this. The name that people seem to most want in Iowa City is familiar to the folks of Iowa. Um, Darren DeVries, who is at West Virginia, was at Drake, has been successful wherever he's been. Would be to me a guy who knows the landscape, he knows the region, he's a good coach, but and the but is not whether he would take the job or if Iowa wants him. Is there the resources in place for him to say, as we said earlier, yes, I can win here? You got to buy out Fran. DeVries has a buyout. Then you're going to have to give him a contract. Then you need money for NIL. The last time this job was open, Dallas, they got a coach from Siena. They got a coach from Siena and they hit. But that's what the interest level was. Is this
Yeah.
program in a better position now than it was 15 years ago? I don't think
Mhm.
so. Not from
And
a successful standpoint, but from a resource standpoint, I don't think so.
And I think one thing that's also working against them, look at the way the other coaches are talking about Fran and the end of his tenure, they're talking about how great of a guy he is, how much they respect him, and how the lack of positioning of this program has put him in this position. So as a coach, when you're seeing all these other guys that are your peers say these things about this job and the place that Fran has been, and he's now leaving as all-time winningest coach, all this success, and this is what he's perceived as, why would you jump to that? Especially when, like we talked about earlier, there's so many jobs out there. If you're DeVries and you're thinking about wanting to leave, there's a lot other better jobs that you could leave for or that you could figure out for rather than trying to come here and really not knowing if it'll be successful and if you'll be supported.
Yeah, and that is the task for Beth Getz. She's got to hit this one. She's got to. This is her first. Not that hiring Jan wasn't a good hire. I think it was. I thought it was then. It was just more of a seamless transition. This.
I could have made. There's not a lot of parts of this job I could confidently say that I could do, but I think that handing the keys over to Jan Jensen is one of those where I could have done that one.
Well, they had people bitching about it this year earlier in the season when they wanted them to play like when Caitlin was here.
After the Indiana game, when they're like, she doesn't know how to coach, and it's like they're playing 4 freshmen 20 minutes.
Yeah, they lost like generational talents and some of the best players.
Michael Jordan, and they're not. Why aren't you still at the top of the Big Ten after when losing the person who scored more than anybody to ever touch a basketball in college? Yeah, why is it not the same, Jan?
Interested to see. We'll end on this. This is a men's basketball podcast because it's after the men's game, obviously. But just your thoughts on the woman, on what you've watched them a lot in person this year, what they can do in March moving forward here. I think that difference between the 6 and the 7 seed is big here because for those that don't know, they have to play on the road.
Yeah, and I saw with the last projection I saw, they would face like Duke in the second round. Like they got that, but I think what helps them the most is how many different ways they've had to learn to win this year. And that's what comes down to in the postseason, which we talk about the men's and their shortcoming. They have one way to win. They don't have a lot of different ways to win, but the women have shown they can win low scoring games. They can win high scoring games. They've shown that if Hannah's in foul trouble and you have to play, Ava big minutes, if you have to play Aaliyah Guyton big minutes and all those freshmen, they're ready. They haven't shown once this year that the moment was too big for them. And even though they lost, they didn't make it to the Big Ten championship, they showed that they can play with anybody multiple times, whether it's USC, UCLA, Ohio State. And when you're being led by a player like Lucy Olson, who's been here before, she's, played in these big games. She's taken those big shots before. I think that the sky is the limit. But then at the end of the day, you have to go out there and do it. There's been great Iowa teams like the team Caitlin's sophomore year that lost to Creighton, where they're at home and everything is going right, but you have to go out there and play the game. So I think that you might see a little bit of like lull as we've seen this season, where they're kind of looking around for somebody to do it because they've been used to number 22 being out there. But I think in this last 15 games, Lucy Olson has shown that like, okay, I'll go do it. And Jan said it. Like, I think that's one thing about like coaches that you have to appreciate is when they don't try to overcomplicate things and try to draw up this and that. Like Janet will just say, Lucy, go be Lucy. This is what we brought you here to do. We brought you here to lead. We love that you love everybody and that you guys are all friends. But at some points you have to play, I'm the best ball. And they're able to do that. And, it's going to come down to Kylie knocking down shots, Taylor knocking down shots. Hannah's shown this year more of like, I'm not going to let anybody push me around, no matter whether you're Lauren Betts or whoever. And I've loved the minutes that we've seen from Ava in the Big Ten tournament. She really showed that she can be a presence. I mean, she looks it 6'4". Her wingspan looks like it's 7'5".
When you have her and Hannah running the break together, those two bigs, they're two of the better bigs running the floor around.
Mm-hmm. And Taylor knows how to find her spots in transition. Stremlo knows how to find people in transition. Like they have if you thought about like, I want to put together a team and I need 8 different types of players, they have 8 different types of players. They're not having a bunch of people that are out there trying to do the same thing and overstepping what their jobs is. I think one thing that they have done in contrast to the men's team is when everybody is on the court, every single one of those women know exactly what their job is to do out there. If it's shooting corner threes and rebounding hard, that's what they're going to go out there and do. If it's pushing the ball up the court and running the pick and roll, that's what they're going to go out there and do. And it comes down to discipline. I think that they are one of the more disciplined teams, but they can't let those long stretches of just standing around on offense and waiting for somebody else to do it for you happen, because that's how you go home. You get down 17-5 at that first media timeout, and everybody's like, oh, okay, it's here. We're here. It's March. Okay.
Yes. And I think you look at kind of for intangibles and things like that. I mean, the core group, the kids you talked about, Hannah and Kylie and Sid and Taylor McCabe, they've been in the national championship game the last 2 years. They know what this tournament's about. And if they can translate that and get the younger players kind of, kind of tell them what it's going to be like and then calm them down when they're in that situation, I think that's really valuable.
Absolutely. I mean, I think of somebody like Aaliyah Guyton. Every minute that she's played this year, it feels like she's just doing her best to show like, I'm ready for this. Mm-hmm. Nothing is too big. I am still like, whatever I did in high school and the player I was, I can still do that at this level. And it's the same with Ava, same with Taylor Stremlow. They don't seem like, oh, I don't know if I can do this because this is college and these players are so much better. No, they're like, this is how I play basketball. This is what I'm going to do at this level. And like you said, it's going to be that calming down, because they're going to try to be like, no, we're not just the Iowa team after Caitlin. That's not who we are. We are not that team. We are, Aaliyah Guyton. We are Taylor Stremno. We are Sida Falter. We've been here before, and we saw that, and we can take that to the next level. This is not going to be the drop off or the after effect, like the championship hangover or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, no, we've proven time and time again this season, we can play with anybody. If you can beat USC, you can beat anybody, because they've looked as good as anybody else. And they were within one shot of beating UCLA and Ohio State. So you're talking about 3 of the best teams in the country. So it's not like you don't know what it feels like. It's not like, you're like North Carolina on the men's side who has one win against, one of the elite teams in the country. They've done that.
Yeah, no doubt. Good resume, and hopefully they're rewarded for that on Sunday when the bracket comes out and they don't get stuck in a tough road environment and are really up against it in that second round. But we will find out on Sunday about that. We'll find out here in the coming days what is to become of the men's basketball program. I think it's safe to say there will be change. We just don't know when and what it will be. So kind of hang tight, and we'll be back on the Hawk Fanatic podcast to talk more about this and spring football rolling up and all that. It was fun, Dallas. We should do this again, man.
Absolutely. And thank you, Fran. If this is the last time we see you, I really appreciated you. I understand why the players and the coaches love you so much. As a basketball fan, I get it. I get why you would want to play for that guy, and I have all the respect for Fran.
Co-sign, and he did a good job here. When it's all said and done, if you're not saying that he did a good job at Iowa, I don't think you're being objective. And with that, we will say goodnight. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Thanks to our sponsors. We'll be back to talk to you soon on the Hawk Fanatic podcast.